to my video, and let's continue to learn SwiftUI together. So today, I'm excited to talk about the URLSession and the JSON data. This is a topic that I'm really passionate about, and I can't wait to share my thoughts and insights with you. So sit back, relax, and let's dive in. So before we continue, don't forget to like and subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can stay up to date on any new topics. Comment down below if you have any questions. So let's get started. So hopefully you enjoyed the last video and you also you also still have your project on the side here. If not, it's okay. You can go on my GitHub page down below in the link. You can download that. You should be able to open up with a application like this. Pretty simple, straightforward. All the data is in the local here in the file that you can actually scroll this thing up down a little bit. Click into it, you can see all the pictures and details and a type for this tomato or each items. So far, there's no difference. The type all the same. Detail might be a little bit different. Pictures different. The name is a little bit different. Oh, and also the description is all the same as well. Currently, do not have any new data to make them look differently. So we want to move those data out from this application here. So in the future, whenever we want to make a change to this, whenever we want to change the data, the application will always show the newest data possible. So that's why we have to move those data onto a server or somewhere online in the cloud that you can always download those informations. All right, as you can see that I already pre-created a JSON here that contains all the data that we needed. Basically, it's a giant array that contains each dictionary of different items that we used to have in the local file there. So let me just give a quick explanation on what is the JSON here. So JSON basically stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So basically, it's a lightweight data interchange format that is easy for humans to read and write, and easy for machines to parse and generate. So it is based on a subset of a JavaScript programming language and is commonly used for asynchronous browser or server communication and data storage. JSON data is actually represented as a key value pair, as you can see here. The name is a key here, and Apple is the actual value. So therefore, this is actually kind of like a dictionary here. So basically, there are key value pairs, and it can be nested as well. So if you have another set of dictionary inside of as a value, that's totally okay. So basically, making it a really more flexible format for representing complex data structure. JSON is one of the format that's widely and popular used by a lot of company and a lot of organization as well. So you probably will see this more often than any other format. There are of course a few of them out there as well or more, but JSON is one of the most popular one here, and also most commonly used by any mobile applications. So let's continue. All right, so let's go back to here and start coding a little bit. But before we do that, let's try to give a little bit of structure to our file so it can be easier recognized here. Since we are following the, since we already talked about MVC and MVVM in a previous video there, so if you don't really know much about MVC or MVVM, I highly suggest you go back to take a look at my previous video, and I will try to link that video at the top right corner here. You can go back. You can easily go back to review that and take a look, see to see what is a MVVM, MVC design patterns, so that you can have a better understanding of here. View. The view model. I'm going to drag down a little bit so we can see them properly. This one basically just the main entrance of the application. We can drag them up. This content view pretty much just like a view that we used to know. Same as the detail view you can drag here. Cell view we can also drag here as well since they're all part of view. Let's make them up a little bit. Okay. So for this, so in order for us to continue this, we need to actually create a thing called a view model. Basically is a part that handles all the logic and the communication between the views and the models. I also put sometimes I also put like API calls in there, but we're gonna combine with a dependency injection and create a network layer here so that we can separate the responsibility there and use dependency injection as well. So we're gonna create a simple file. It's gonna be just be a normal Swift file. We can actually call this we can pretty much call this, let's just say, just for easier understand, let's just call it a view model here. You can expose to tests, so we can probably easier to do some unit tests in down the road. So let's just call class view model, and we want to use observable object. So that eventually, whenever we get data, we can just quickly publish to notify the view to redraw the view, and the view will automatically handles the new incoming data. We are gonna need a interface since we're gonna use a dependency injection, right? So why don't we go ahead and we can hang on here for a little bit, like we don't really have to do anything here. Let's go to actually create a network layer first. So let's open up another file. Let's just call a network session, so they can help us to properly handle URL session and properly handles any data that coming from the API or internet. So we're going to call this network session, and it's a class network session. And since we're going to use a dependency injection here, we're going to also create a protocol here. Protocol, let's just call network interface. And inside the interface, we want to do what we want to do for this app here. We want to download those data. So let's just call a function fetch data. We probably need to pass a URL so that we can actually downloading those things. And we're going to use Async Away. It's a way of SwiftUI to make a API call asynchronously. It's pretty new, but personally I think that is brilliant and simple compared to Swift and SwiftUI and combine the type of API call features. SwiftUI is much easier and then much easier to understand and much easier to manipulate if you don't have any really complicated API logic or API feature and like API and network feature you need to handle. Async Away is perfectly fine for any new application that's in SwiftUI. And we want to pretty much return the data because eventually we're going to handle and parsing those data from the view model layer. Because whenever you download anything from online, it only come in as a data format, and you have to handle how would you like to convert or mapping those data into a maybe a dictionary or maybe an array or anything that your code can comprehend and can read. So, but for now, let's just return a data. And we're going to use dependency injection, so we are going to use network interface here. So let's see, going to have some error shows up. Basically, type network session does not conform to protocol network interface. The only reason of that is you have to implement the detailed implementation of this fetch data as method. So you can just hit that, fix it itself, or you can just start the typing, and it will show up this function here. And we want to create a better, I would say a better practice so that you are actually going to be capturing this URL session, depending on what's your goal there. You could capture it or you don't have to, but I think capture it is a better option there. So you can actually properly utilize the dependency injection all over the place. You'll see the benefit whenever we'll start doing some unit tests. So for now, let's continue. Let's do a init. And we want to give some default value here, since we know by default we're going to use a actual URL session here. But maybe we want to do some configuration and give a, you can use the default or ephemeral. I think we're going to use this one. So it does not use any default persistent storage for caching cookies and credential stuff. Just in case in the future we want to create our own things here. So let's use that for now. And for inside this fetch data though, in SwiftUI is actually way easier compared to any time in the past. In the past, you have to do something like create a URLSession, creating a URL request, and adding the URL with data to the request. Then the request, you have to pass the request into the URL session, and then you can start a data task with the request you have, and also handles the data come back from the server. You have to handle the HTTP URL response and all that sort of things. If you don't know much of that, that is totally fine. If you do know, you already know the pain. But in SwiftUI, you can handle pretty much all that in just for this demonstration purpose though. You can just handle this with 3 or 4 lines of code. That's pretty much it. So let's do that. So let's return a tuple here, response, and you go to try away. And we're going to call the view URL session we captured above. URLSession.data. It's going to be data from a URL. And then when that happens, we just want to do a simple guardlet check to make sure we kind of handles the HTTP response, because sometimes the server maybe return a code. So for anybody who don't know, whenever you open up a web browser, sometimes you will see a 404 code on the screen, right? Or something like that. You probably heard of it, like you cannot find a page or something. So that's a server response code. That basically, based on the code, there is a universal, like, kind of like a table of codes. It's like telling you what the current status is, like what happens whenever you open up this web page, or whenever you're trying to access the data from there. Basically, normally, in any situation, if everything goes smoothly, there's no issue, you should only receiving one code, which is 200, a code 200. If you receive anything else, that might mean you have some kind of issues, either from your end or server end, or something happened. So you just have to handle them properly, or potentially debugging them, or show them to the user. Maybe you don't have a way to handle it, or you just want to notify the user or something. So normally you should just 200 code, and should be fine there. If anything happens, we're just gonna throw an error back so that we know there was something. Let's just call it bad server response, because the only thing we are looking for is just 200 code. Anything else, there means some issues there. So after that, we're just gonna return the data back. And that's pretty much our layer, a network layer with the dependency injection into it. So next, I want to go back to the view model here. So here that we can start, since we already have the network session, a network layer there, we can already start to typing we can also do the same thing with the dependency injection and try to capture that network layer. So let's say a network session here. Let's call the network interface instead of network session itself. So that will help us for the dependency injection down the road. And we want to potentially publish some data to it, to the UI side. So let's just call that items. For exactly what's the item, I do not know. Let's just make an array of a string for now. I'm sure eventually we'll change that. But for now, let's just call that. Let's give a question optional and make it an empty array into it for now. Then let's continue typing the initialization part for this class. So we're going to have a init. We're going to pass a network session to it, and that is going to be a network interface type that we want to just use network session and a default initialization to it. And that's pretty much for our initial initialization here, but we want to assign that network session equal to network session. So that's going to be our view model's initialization. Now we can actually go back to the content view. We can start to removing those things here. We actually don't need them anymore. And from here, we want to say a state object. And let's call it view model equal to view model. Just give a default initialization, and that's pretty much it. We'll come back to fix all other issues here, but ideally, this should be the view model dot items. And in this item, assuming we have all the strings in there, so for now we're just trying to fix the issue on the UI here a little bit first before we continuously do something. It says could be potentially no, let's just do that for now. Let's assuming that's definitely have something there, so we can satisfy the UI. It don't stop us from building anything. And we can continue to go back to our view model and finish up the API part of work. So, okay, our canvas or the preview showed up properly. Even though we don't have all the data, that is totally fine there, because currently we do not have anything inside this view model. This string array here is totally empty. Next, we want to continue to create the actual function that handles the actual data come back from the network session there, or the network layer. So let's call it main actor. Main actor basically is act almost as asynchronously or GCD from the traditional SwiftUI or Objective-C. Basically, it's telling the code down below or the function, this code function. Basically, it's saying we want to make sure those data, those code process on the main thread instead of background thread. Because there's a threading issue here is whenever you're trying to update anything on the UI level, you have to update them on the main thread. Otherwise, your app will end up crashing. Because I think that makes more sense, right? Since it's like you have a stage, right? You have a curtain and you have somebody performing in front of it, and you have somebody behind the curtain telling them what to do and handy water and all the stuff. So in order to to have the user actually see the performance, you actually go to the front of the stage so that user can see. So it's kind of almost a similar concept there. If you don't completely understand what is threading here, or background thread or main thread issue here, that's pretty much the easy explanation there. But of course, if you want to know more, feel free to pause the video and go to, you can Google it online. It's pretty easy to find all the answers online there. All right, let's continue here. We're going to continue with async and throws as well. And we're going to do a quick check here. So we know we are going to calling a particular URL here. So normally we not supposed to just putting the URL inside or something. But for our demonstration purpose here, we're just going to putting that somewhere, maybe in the view model or somewhere above. So let's go grab that URL. All right, so we're back to this JSON page here. So let's grab this URL here, which is pretty much up here. Let's just temporarily put it here on top of it. Private let and API. Just call it. Maybe I just call it API for now. That's gonna be our the link to retrieve all the data. All right, let's continue here. So we can do a guard let check. Make sure that URL actually works before we actually making a call to it. So string, let's just call API. Otherwise, we're gonna just throw an URL error. We're gonna say it is a bad URL. Then after that, if that's success, of course we want to continue. So we're gonna get a response. We're gonna get the data back from the network layer. So try away the network session fetch data URL. But in order to have this be a more proper dependency injection way and proper unit test ways, we're gonna actually passing this URL string here. URL string, and it's gonna be a string. We're gonna pass this URL string. So we're gonna move this to the main view there, even though we're not supposed to pass there. Or you can create a constant somewhere, a file just holding all the hard-coded strings. But for now, we're just gonna hold right here. Gonna hold right there, and we're gonna call this private actually, since we don't need to do anything about it. Let's go back. We already, assuming here we got the data back and the response of data. Then next is actually, we want to actually read this properly. So we want to parse this out from a data to a readable content. So in order to do that, we can use a JSON serializer to do that. Eventually, we're going to use JSON decoder when we have a proper model for it. But for now, let's use JSON serializer. So I'm going to say try JSON serialization. I believe that is just JSON data with, actually JSON with the data, yes. With the data, I was going to call response. Then as a make a dictionary. Well, actually, when the data actually come back as an array, so let's call it any first. Or more specifically, we could, let's just call any, array any, because it's any array. Because for now, we don't know what that may be come back. It could be a string, it could be something else. For now, that is that. And we want to print this out to actually see the actual data. So you can, it just gives you some warning. You don't have to worry about that right now. You can try to handle it, or you don't have to, because it's still going to print out stuff if there's actually data. So how would we call this code here? We actually go back to our main view here. Whenever this list show up, we want to actually call task. Task here basically is a processing a data or anything that you need to process whenever the view appears. It used to be appear on appear, and then you put a task block inside that handle it, but that kind of like more code. Apple actually add a new array, which you just call it task. So in order to do that, let's do catch let error, and we're gonna call is try away view model dot get data, and now here we can actually pass in the API strings here. that should give us the data, or if there's something goes wrong, it will throw any errors back. So we want to actually print them out so we can see what's going on and do some debugging if we need to. So let's just try to run it. So we can actually see in the debugging console here, see what kind of data we got. Alrighty, so as you can see, our application show up properly, even though we don't have anything, because actually we didn't really truly handle and everything. We did not actually pass the data to this view model's published variable, so that we currently don't have anything there. So that is all totally okay. So the only thing that we cared here is actually we got those data back here. As you can see, we got all the data back. That is a good thing. And if you have any issues, you might not get those data back. You might get an error back or something else. Well, that's pretty much for today's video, and I hope you enjoyed it and learned something new. So don't forget to like and subscribe to stay up to date with all of my latest content. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them in the section below. And as always, thanks for watching.